All right. So, hi, everybody. Thank you all for coming today. So, this is our Envirothon 101 webinar, where we are going to give you a bit of an overview of Envirothon. Some people might be brand new to Envirothon. Some people might be returning, but hopefully this is an opportunity to get some of your questions answered if you still have some. So we will introduce ourselves as the host. So my name is Sam Nadell. I am with the Thurston Conservation District. I serve as the lead coordinator for the South Puget Sound regional event, and I am also the statewide team support subcommittee lead.
Hi, everyone. I'm Catherine. I am at Pierce Conservation District. Right now, I am the replacement for their AmeriCorps education specialist. And a big part of what I do is help get Envirothon both on the state and regional level.
And we also have a few other people helping us out today. Emma, who is with King CD and is going to be monitoring the chat. So if you have any questions throughout the presentation, feel free to put them in the chat. I think we're going to try to answer all of the questions towards the end. We also have a former Envirothon teacher here, Joe, who's going to be speaking a little bit about his experience as a teacher with Envirothon a little bit later on, but he will be around to answer some questions later on as well. So what is Envirothon? So Envirothon is a North American competition for high school students where the subjects are all environmentally based. As it says here, the mission of Envirothon is to develop knowledgeable, skilled, and dedicated citizens who have an understanding of natural resources and are willing and prepared to work towards achieving and maintaining a balance between the quality of life and the quality of the environment. And this event takes place in all the states and Canada. So this year, the national, or rather the North American competition will actually be taking place in Canada. And for these competitions, they are often managed by your local conservation district, with input from the WACD, Washington Conservation Society, and the Conservation Commission. So conservation districts are these kind of funny, non-regulatory state agencies that provide a lot of environmental support for their local area and also contribute to these Envirothon competitions statewide. And if you are a student or have a teacher who has students who might be interested in participating, this is a really good way to expose students to a lot of different environmental science topics, more so than maybe what they are just learning within their classes, as well as careers in natural resources. We have a lot of different people from different environmental science careers working on these competitions. The competition is designed to feature hands-on learning, and all of the exams have a hands-on or presentation component. As a team, students will, develop teamwork skills and need to work within time constraints to be able to complete different exams. It's a really nice thing to have on a college resume or job application, anything like that. And if you eventually make it on to later and later stages of the competition, like the North American level, there are potentials for cash prizes or scholarships. And the way that Envirothon works is that today we're kind of talking about the regional events. So this is the first stage where schools from nearby counties all come together to one location to participate in a regional competition. Then the winners of each county from the regional event, move on to a state competition, and that will take place in early or mid-May. And then the North American or national event will take place all the way over in New Brunswick, Canada. So it should be a pretty exciting trip for the team that represents Washington. The way that teams are structured is that it is a team of 5 students. Some schools will sometimes have an alternate or 2 as well participate in the training for the event, so that if a student is sick or unable to go, another student can take their place. And ideally, students are all coming from the same school. This can also be a homeschool group or an organization or club. Some regional events have restrictions on how many teams can represent each school. And we will talk later on about the different regional coordinators and who to talk to if you have any questions about any of that. And for this exam, there are multiple subjects that students will be tested on. And so I'm actually going to turn it over to Catherine to chat about that. And Catherine, I'm happy to advance the slides whenever you need.
All right, thanks, Sam. So as Sam mentioned, we do have some testing subjects. So in total, there's 5 natural resource testing categories, 4 of which kind of are reoccurring and happen every year. So that's going to be the aquatics, forestry, soil, land use, and wildlife. And then in addition to that, we have our 5th topic, which changes annually depending on the event. And this year it's adapting to a changing climate. That's going to be what the oral presentation is based on. And depending on your region will kind of depend on how that oral presentation would look. So for the aquatics portion, so each test is broken up into 4 sections. So you'll have a multiple choice section, you'll have a short answer section, we'll have a matching section, and then there's a hands-on component as well. For aquatics, students are expected to understand the water cycle, be able to define different aquatic terminology like what a watershed is, understand the chemical and physical properties of water. It will focus on freshwater systems and marine systems, so they can expect to kind of have some of coming from both. Some aquatic animal identification, water quality testing and sampling methods. So that's kind of an example of what the hands-on component of the tests may look like. Understanding a riparian zone. There's a bunch of opportunities to go to workshops. There's also some study guides and curriculum outlines online as well to give the students a better idea of what they can expect. But these are some of the basic outlines of what the aquatics will look like. And then on to forestry. So native plant identification, that's something that in the past has been used as the hands-on component for the test. Understanding tree communities and succession, understanding wildlife habitat and how that relates to forestry. There's also going to be some components of forestry management and how that might look in the natural resource world. Understanding issues like fire, global warming, recreation, and how that affects forest health and management. Wildfires have been something that we've been dealing with, you know, the past 5 years more so than we have in previous years. So that's definitely something that I noticed popped up in some of the tests last year. So those are going to be some of the basic outlines that you can expect with forestry. For soil and land use, so we're gonna expect your students to be able to recognize features of soil profiles. Soil profiles and soil maps are something that has been used in those hands-on components. Understanding plant nutrients and how they are held in the soil, recognizing hydric soils, understanding the effects of land use on soils and how how different types of land use, where like agriculture and urban areas, how that can affect soil health, identifying erosion and discussing methods to reduce erosion, and then identifying different soil characteristics, be that soil pH or other nutrient levels in soils, and how that can affect food sources and our agriculture. For wildlife, identifying common wildlife species and wildlife signs. So like maybe bird calls, or if you're out, hiking, you see tracks, being able to identify those different tracks. Describing predator and prey relations. One of the potential hands-on components is looking at a wildlife skull and being able to identify, is that a predator or a prey, an omnivore or herbivore or a carnivore. Evaluate given habitat and its suitability for a specific species. And then describing some of the major factors affecting the threatened and endangered species in this area and in other areas as well. And then for the topic this year, again, that's adapting to a changing climate. So definitely a topic that is worth discovering and discussing. That's going to be the oral presentation. So depending on the region, the students might get the oral presentation the day of, or they might be given the prompt prior to the presentation and have time to work on it. So that's really dependent on which region you will be competing in. So like I said, it varies. And then the presentation will be given to a panel of judges. So the students will have about 30 minutes to prepare for a presentation, and then they will present that to judges, and then the panel will judge their presentation, and then depending on the presentation, we'll kind of choose what they felt was the best and covered the topic, which is the adapting to a changing climate.
Cool. Thank you, Catherine. So we're just going to go through some pictures. This is an older presentation that highlighted some of the past competitions, but just to kind of give you the sense of what these competitions look like. So location does vary depending on your regional event. So here you can see some students are working indoors, looks like on the wildlife exam, while other events take place more outdoors or in covered shelters. Keep in mind that this is going to be in April or May, or March or April for these events. So there might be weather to contend with, but we've been pretty lucky in the past. There's some time for some pre-competition activities like icebreaker activities. We have also been working to implement career panels in some or all of the regional events, so that after the exam portions, there is time for students to ask questions to professionals in the field and learn a little bit more about relevant career paths. So we've got some other sites here, as you can see, from 2019, inclusion of community partners such as the U.S. Forest Service. That looks like Doug from one of the Thurston Conservation District board members there. Students working on the aquatic station. This is actually from the state competition back in 2015. And then I threw in a picture. This is the South Puget Sound regional event last year. We had, I believe we had 7 teams, and you can see we gave out hats with our with a logo last year, so we could keep track of where all the students were. This was out at Squaxin Park, or formerly Priest Point Park in Olympia. So this is kind of what the event looks like from an outsider's perspective, but we did want to give folks some insight on what it's like for a teacher or someone closer to that group of students. So we do have a teacher here today. Joe, if you are there, would you mind coming off mute and introducing yourself and sharing a bit about your experience?
Sure, yeah, thanks for having me. Full disclosure, I'm definitely walking through my school right now. Hey everyone, my name is Joe Camacho. I teach environmental science over at Foster High School in Tukwila. Last year was our first year competing Envirothon event for as long as I can remember. I don't know if anyone else from Foster has. It was great. I had a group of 6 students who participated. We had a group of 5 and then 1 alternate. And their experience was pretty similar up until we got to the event. So it looked like this. We met weekly with all 6 of us, 6 students, and then me as their mentor coach. We practiced some of the skills, some of the topic areas. We assigned each student 2 topic areas, and it kind of gave them ownership over not having to study every single aspect of the Envirothon competition. They were just responsible for 2 of them. And my students really took it away for the presentation. One of the tests that they have to do is a presentation. Last year was all around using wastewater as a resource. So since we live in Tukwila, we're close to one of the treatment facilities in Renton. So they got really involved doing a lot of outreach to interview different organizations like the people over at the wastewater treatment facility, as well as one of our local fields called Starfire. So there was a lot of outreach. Students got experience sending emails, conducting interviews. They had a really great time. When it came to the competition, it was held over at the Brightwater treatment facility in King County. And I would say all of the students had a similar experience except for our alternate. Our alternate, she wasn't able to join our main team, so she got to get paired up with other alternates from other schools. And her experience was a little different from the main team. I do have Dennis here, a student who participated in the Envirothon competition, and I think he can tell you a little bit more about what it was like for the students' perspective when we were at Brightwater and getting ready for that. Here he comes.
Cool, thanks.
Hello, thank you. Yeah, my name's Dennis. I was part of the team last year for 2022. Our team was Foster High School. Our team got 1st place in Northwest Regional and then 4th place in the state. And then it was a really fun experience for sure. Leading up to it, I think the most stressful 2 weeks leading up to the date of the competition. For sure, it was very stressful because we had to prepare a lot. So that's something that students have to keep in mind. Is like the 2 weeks leading up to it, you're going to have to study on top of having to prepare for the entire presentation, and that's a lot of work. So it's important to have a strong structure of teamwork inside your team, and having a team spirit so that everyone doesn't feel discouraged at the end of the right before the competition, and everyone's like, oh yeah, we got this. And that's something that I think for us we did pretty well. So we had a strong team spirit, and on the date of the competition, everyone was pretty supportive of each other. Even our alternative, even though they didn't get to do much, we still involved them in the process of making the presentation. And so we were mindful of keeping everyone being able to participate in a way, despite on the actual day of the competition, alternatives may not have a big opportunity to do the actual test and presentations. Yeah, thank you.
Excellent. Thank you.
I
I appreciate the insight.
I wanted to mention something. Yeah, thanks, Dennis, for being here. He's actively in another meeting, so see you later, Dennis. He does too much. I also wanted to share that my students had an opportunity to participate both in the regional event for King County and at the state event. I didn't get to go with them to the state event. I got COVID. It was awful. But they had a really great job participating there. One thing I wasn't sure of, Sam, is the state event usually over multiple days? Because I know last year it was just one day. And I think that was a lot more accommodating. It was easier since these competitions were just one day instead of overnight, it was a lot easier for me to get transportation permission from my school district to take the students. So there was a lot less work on my end because I know my school district requires me to get board approval for any overnight trips. As far as transportation, I was able to secure that through my district. I didn't get any funding through the conservation district for buses. So that's something to keep in mind if anyone's looking for funding for transportation. Food was provided too. So I was really grateful that there was food provided for the students at the events. and they were really cognizant of any dietary restrictions for our students too. So appreciate that. And I'll stick around if there's any questions at the end of the presentation, if anyone has them. Thanks, y'all.
Awesome. Thank you, Joe and Dennis. I believe we are still finalizing the details of the state event. Catherine, do you know if this year we're going back to the 2-day format?
Yeah, I'd be happy to speak on that a little bit. So we are going to go back to the 2-day format, but we're definitely going to have it where if some teams aren't able to do the overnight stay, if they let us know ahead of time, we can accommodate those that want to come in the day of. There will just be some activities and icebreakers that we'll do the day prior. So, I mean, if possible, we definitely encourage students to try to come out that night prior and have that great camping experience. But we do plan to do a 2-day event, but we, you know, if need be, teams can show up the day of.
Yeah, we're hoping to have some details of the state event finalized soon.
Yeah, we have it down to two venue sites. So one will be either in the Key Peninsula area, or one's going to be in the like Auburn Black Diamond area. So we're trying to either be more centralized. I think, you know, the more central area would be a little bit nicer for some of those folks that are farther out in the Palouse. But we should have that. We just sent out a poll, so we should have that hopefully within the next week or so, that finalized, and we'll send that out for everybody as well.
Cool. Okay, so back to the regional competitions. So again, we start with the regional events. That is where those teams get narrowed down to determine who's going to the state event. We have different dates depending on the regional event, and later on I can show you the breakdown of which counties go to which events if you're unsure. We are, you know, spread out from late March through late April, but make sure you're connecting with your regional coordinator to get finalized details, especially if you're in the North Central or Southwest regional events, where I don't believe we have any finalized dates and locations yet. So we've been throwing a lot of information at you that might seem a little bit overwhelming, but we are hoping that we can provide a lot of resources for students to use to prepare for the event. So if you haven't yet, I highly recommend going on the Washington State Envirothon website. We have a lot of resources on there, including past tests, videos, written out descriptions of what you might expect at stations, and some interactive online resources and activities as well. If you are unsure about how to access some of these materials or looking for more, I highly recommend contacting your local coordinator. Another reason to contact a local coordinator is because we do have a number of study bins available depending on location. So certain conservation districts have these set of 4 bins, so one for each of our main subjects, that can be rented out to schools and teams to use to prepare for the competition. We have, I believe, a set of videos made by Snohomish CD in the past that kind of goes through what those materials are in each bin, but there is a binder of information in each one that kind of goes through those materials as well. If you would like to rent these bins, I highly recommend doing it for study purposes. Please make sure you're connecting with your regional coordinator. Even within some regional events, there might be multiple sets of bins that teams can use at different times. We are also working to put together some workshops that folks could use to learn more about a specific subject. In the past, these have been mostly in-person workshops and focused on teams in that region. We've been trying to make them a little bit more equitable and try to have virtual components to these workshops if possible. And if there are virtual components, they don't need to be regional anymore, and we can share them on the statewide level. So we have a few workshops listed on the link here. And when we wrap up, I'll make sure to share this presentation in the chat and maybe over email as well to make sure other people have it. But that's another thing to connect with regional coordinators about. and check on the website for updates to the available workshops. And here is your list of regional coordinators if you were unsure of what category you fall in. I know this does not include every county in the state. And if you do not see your county represented, I recommend reaching out to maybe multiple to figure out which event makes the most sense to attend. So for example, we have a team from Clark County that attended the South Puget Sound Regional last year because there wasn't really a closer event for them. So even though we don't, our reach doesn't necessarily include, Clark County, they were able to still come to our event and participate. So here are the people to kind of chat with if you have any questions throughout this process. I know that different regional events have different registration deadlines, but if you are here right now, know that there is still time to register for any of the events if you have not yet, and there is still time to get your questions answered and make sure you have all the information you need to for you and your students to feel comfortable participating. So with that, you can find some registration forms on the state website if you have not already received it from your regional coordinator. At this point, at least for our regional event, we don't require that student names be finalized. So if you feel confident about being able to get 5 students by the time of the event, and you want to make sure you have your school registered, feel free to do so without those student names at the time. And with that, we have a lot of time to answer some questions right now. And I already see some in the chat. So maybe Emma, would you be able to potentially read off some questions and who they're from?
Yeah, it looks like one of them was already answered during the presentation, but the first one we have is, what if we have an alternative school within our high school and a team from regular ed? Will that count as teams from separate schools?
I imagine that is fine. And I also think that's a great question for your regional coordinator. I believe this question came from someone from the Southeast Regional, and I don't know how many teams typically participate in that event, but I imagine that it should be fine, but I would check with Jody just in case.
All right, and then we've got a question about the study bins. Kate asks, how long do we get to have the bins each year? Last year it was a bit overwhelming trying to get through the whole bin in time before we had to turn it in. Do you have a recommendation for working through the bins or any other study resources that would make studying easier?
Sure. So I don't want to speak for other districts. I recognize that last year it was probably a little bit tight. Last year, for a lot of districts, it was the first time we had those bins, and so we were actively getting those materials as the weeks counted down before the competition. I would really like this year to be able to offer bins for a week or two at a time, and I think the best way to approach it is to try to have a not a day, but maybe a solid after school chunk to be able to go through what's in those bins. It's also like Joe was saying, I thought it was Joe was saying that they kind of broke down which students were focusing on which topics. And so being able to divvy up those bins and assign a bin or two to a group of those students kind of cuts down on the time you need with the bins. I think depending on the number of other schools in your county that would be using those bins, as well as the time from now until the competition, are really going to impact how long each district is able to rent out their bins. So for example, the Thurston Conservation District has a set of bins, but so does Pierce Conservation District. So for the South Puget Sound regional event, I, at the Thurston CD, can focus on getting the Thurston County schools their bins, while Pierce can focus on theirs. And because our event isn't until late April, we have a little bit more flexibility with that. So as with a lot of these things, please make sure you're contacting your regional coordinator. I know for our regional event that I'm working to get those bins and rental form available by the next week, maybe 2 weeks, so that we can start renting out those bins.
Are there any other study materials that you would recommend?
I'd really dig through what's on the Envirothon website. I think there's a lot of really good things there. And if you want to really, if you're really hungry for more things to study, this is a competition that takes place in a lot of the other different states. And so there are a lot of state materials from different states that might not be locally relevant as far as the species or maybe the issues, but still contains really good information to look at. There is also, I haven't looked at it in a while, there is, I believe, some more information on the national Envirothon webpage, but I think there's a lot of good stuff on our website.
Yeah, I would, to your point, Sam, I would like to highlight there's some study guides on the state website, and those are organized by how long you have to study. So if you have 1 hour to study, use these resources. If you have 2 hours, that's a great place to start. And if you're feeling like a lot of pressure, it's a kind of a more simple thing to do.
Yeah, I forgot about that. Thank you.
Those are all the questions we have right now. Does anyone have additional questions?
I mean, that's fine if you don't. I just kind of assumed we were going to get some more, but hopefully that means that we covered everything we needed.
We do have one more question. Can you
Okay,
have
great.
teams of 4?
I don't see why you couldn't. It from a pure numbers perspective, it puts you at a disadvantage, but all of for example, there's not any aspect of the competition that requires 5 people. It's just the limit that we put on it. So if you want to come with the team of 4, go for it.
One thing to note, that's teams of 4 are great for regionals, but we do have some limitations put on us by the national organizers that we must have teams of 5 at state. So that is, yeah.
Great, thank you. I didn't know that.
So I've got a question.
Go for it.
So format wise, Mr. Camacho was talking about having kids specialize in areas.
Mm-hmm.
So is the format such that individual kids take individual portions, or does everybody do everything?
Yeah, so a group of students, a team of students will travel together as they go through the 5 stations.
Okay. So it's a team activity all the way through.
Yes, that is
Gotcha.
The hope is that the students are able to work together and bounce ideas off each other. But I think the approach was more of just we with our time, we might be able to get one student to be like the expert or so in a specific subject, which might alleviate the pressure for everyone trying to learn everything. But yes, everyone travels as a team. You will be with your team for the entire competition.
Got it. Yeah, and I get it, Joe. Thank you.
Excellent. Any last questions? Because otherwise we can wrap up early.
We have a question. Can you have more than one team per school?
Oh, great. So I was speaking about it a little bit before. This is going to depend on which regional event you are in, and I highly recommend reaching out to your regional coordinator to check on that. So, for example, for the South Puget Sound regional event, we are currently setting a limit of one team per school, just because we have a really wide area and a lot of interest right now, and might not have the capacity to have a single day event with multiple teams per school. I know other regional events operate differently than that, though. So check with who, whichever name is in, coordinates with your county here, and they can give you that information. Do you know, Emma, do you know if the Northwest event, if there's a limit on that?
Yeah, so based on our interest so far, we've been allowing 2 teams per school. I know in the past we've sometimes allowed 3 teams, but for now we want to try and accommodate as many different schools as possible, so we're limiting it to 2.
Oh, thank you. Everything else. All right. Well, if you do not have any more questions, you are free to go. We will be we were recording this, and so we hope to have this recording available on the website to share with folks who weren't able to attend as soon as we can, hopefully soon. And again, if you have any questions at all, feel free to reach out. We will try our best to answer. But we hope that if you're here today, you still are interested in the competition and are able to participate in a regional event. Thank you, everybody. And Catherine, I think you can stop the recording.